Bye.
Hi guys, my name is Chris, and in this video I'll take you through the Ansible Templating Module. I'll go through how to template a file from localhost to remote host, how to apply specific access rights to that file on the remote host, how to make use of the default variables that are to be found in the templating module, and also how to template multiple files at once to a remote host. And last but not least, I will show you some tips and tricks that are very nice to know when using this module. So let's get started. I will simply start off by templating a very basic configuration file to our target hosts. So the first thing I will do is that I will create a new directory and call it templates. Inside that directory I'll create a new file and call that configuration.conf.j2. So the last part, the .j2 extension, is the extension for the Jinja 2 templating language which Ansible uses for templating file to target hosts. Inside of here I will create a variable and I will call that changeable variable, and we are now ready to work on the playbook. I will copy the name of the variable, and the first thing I'll do is that I will define it in the playbook. So I'll write vars, the name of the variable, and some text here. So we will then create the first task and call it template a configuration file. We will make use of the template module, and the first parameter which we define here is the source, and the source in our case will be the path to the file that we want to template. In my case, because I named this templates, this is a default name which Ansible recognizes, so I do not need to specify the first part of the path. It will find the file on its own. And my file is in the root, so this should work. We will then specify a destination on the target host, and I would like to put it in some directory, and then the name of the file without the Jinja 2 extension, just like that. And I will do it as a root user, so I'll write become true. So let's run this playbook and see what happens. Let's take a look at the target hosts, and as you can see we are already inside the sum directory, and here we have the configuration file.conf, and if we take a look at that file we find our configuration text right here. Besides just adding this text in the configuration file, we could also make use of the Ansible template variables, which are provided by default in the template module. So let's take a look at how we could make use of those variables, and for that I've prepared a setup with all those variables right here, and I will leave a link in the description to my GitHub where you can read this in more detail. But here we see that we are provided with variables such as the template host, template unique ID, path, full path, destination, and the current date which this template ran. So let's see how this works in action, and for that to work we have to also add the variables in here and save both files, and then we can execute the playbook. Let's take a look at the target hosts, and if we exit this file and actually look at it again, we now see that we have the current date in which this template ran, the path on the remote system, the full path to the configuration file, the username, the ID of the owner, and stuff like that. I've cleaned up in our variables and only left the changeable variable up here just to avoid any confusion, because now we're going to take a look at how we can control access rights for this configuration file on our target hosts using the template module. So we can apply a couple of flags to help us out, and the first flag is the owner flag, which specifies the owner of the configuration file. In that case we will set that to me. The second flag is the group flag, which specifies a group of people that can edit and view and delete this file, and in that case that will be me as well. And then we have the mode flag, and the mode flag specifies the access rights for this configuration file for rest of the users that are registered on the remote host. And whenever I have to set the mode, I normally use this website called permissionscalculator.org. This will help you create the permissions in a octal way with the octal notation, and with the symbolic notation if you are into that. And in this case you can specify it by just tapping those fields down here, and that will generate a octal number which you can then insert into your playbook right here. If you want to see more or learn more about this, you can go into my video about the file module where I go much more in detail. Let's try to run this playbook and see what happens. The playbooks ran successfully, and if we take a look at the target hosts, we have the configuration file right there. And if we take a look, we now see that Chris is the owner and the group is set to Chris, and those are the access rights which just got applied. Now let's take a look at how we can template multiple files and not just one. So the first thing I will do is that I will change the name to be template multiple files to remote hosts, and then we will have to add some additional files. So I will add a file called test.php.j2, and I will create a file called testfile.txt.j2. And if I didn't mention it before, the main reason why we extended with the Jinja2 expression here is because then we can make use of variables like this, which are read from either the inventory or the Ansible vault. So if you don't have variables that have to be read from one of those sources, then you actually do not need to extend it with the G2. So let's take a look at the playbook itself. So in here we will have to create a loop, and this loop will have multiple items. The first one is configuration.conf, then we have test.php, and then we have the testfile.txt. So from here we will then loop through and select each item, and all items extend the Jinja2 expression, so that's all good. And as I told you before, the reason why I only have item here and not the full path is because Ansible recognizes this folder name. If your folder name is different, you would maybe have to write /files/ and then your items if your folder name was files. But in my case, I'll just write items, and the destination will just be the name of each item in the loop, just like that. So let's see what happens when we run this playbook. So Ansible executed this successfully, and if we take a look at the target hosts, we see that all the files are in there and everything is good. I will now modify this task with some additional features that could be very useful in many situations when using the template module. The first thing we can do is that we can add a backup flag and set that to true. And what that does is that if those files are already existing on the remote host and we try to template them again but with any change in them, Ansible will take care of creating a backup of the old ones so we don't lose any data. So for example, if we add some changes in here, then we can run the playbook, and we will see that if we take a look at the remote hosts, we have the new configuration which just got templated and the old configuration down here with a timestamp. A second thing we can do, which is more general for all Ansible modules, is that we can modify our loop to fit our purpose. So we can put curly braces around it and give it a parameter name. So this will be file, and we will then add the parameter user and set that to root. We can do this for all three files. So the second one will be test.php, and the last one will be testfile.txt. So the first file will belong to root, the second will belong to Chris, and the last will to root, for example. Up here we will then add item.file, and we will write item.file, and we can then specify the owner as item.user. So let's see this in action. Let's take a look at the target hosts, and if we do an lsla in here, we see that root is now the owner of the configuration file and the test file, but Chris is for the rest, and also on machine 2. The last thing that I want to show you is that whenever you template files to a remote host, they actually have a lot of values within them by default already. And we can tap into them and take a look at that by writing register and then give it a name like details. Then down here we will create a new task called see details. Use the debug module, output a variable, and the variable name is details. So let's run the playbook and see what we have here. As you can see here, we get outputted the default values and the values that we apply using the templating module. And here you can see if the file changed, and you can see the checksum of the file. You can see if it failed, and much more. You can see the size as well, and you can actually tap into those variables in a later task by typing details.size, for example, down here. So this is just good to know if you're new to Ansible and new to this module in general. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like the content, please hit the like button below. If you want to see more in the future, you should definitely hit the subscribe button. I cover multiple modules of Ansible on my channel, so feel free to go check that out, and hopefully I'll see you in another video. See ya!